Cathedral Rock in Sedona. I thought I would be here all by myself. However, it turns out that this is a national holiday weekend. Martin Luther King Day is Monday, so hordes of people. So I had to get here before sunrise to avoid the crowds, and I don't think I did it. At a fee station, you have to pay $5 per day, but that's fair. It also appears they don't trust you to stay on the trail, at least not in this section. Wire. Wonder if it's electrified. Boy, it's nippy out this morning. Disregard the breathing. I'm used to a high altitude. Okay, up there is the saddle. That's where I will eventually be. And then down over the other side. It's like 7:30 in the morning. Sunrise is at 7:30, so there's Mr. Sun working. Okay, now for a little geology. This low area, which is what Sedona is built on, that's called the Hermit Formation. That was formed in mudflats and dunes way back in the Permian age, like 280 million years ago. So that's the base layer down here, at least what we see right now. It's easily broken up. Like I said, it's like a mudstone. So because of that, it erodes away easily and it forms the base, that the town's built on. The next layer is this. That's the Schnelby Hill Formation. And that was formed on a marine coastal area. So this whole area used to be down near the equator, and there were inland seas, or actually the sea, that formed. This is mostly sandstone. There's also layers of limestone up there that we will get to. But the upper layers, the more weight, that's the coconut. That's not coconut. Coquino sandstone. So we'll talk about that a little later. The last 2 weeks back in Ohio, I had the rhinovirus. So we will see how the lungs do. At least the 2-week coughing spell is mostly over. I guess this trail was closed for a while. They worked on it, as you can tell. Nice home over on the hillside. Well, there's where I parked. Up, up, up. A little rocky. But it is Cathedral Rock, right? Rather steep ascent. Well, looks like the rear end might get a little buggered up. A little slippery.
A little bit, yep.
Well, Ron, this is a little iffy, but I don't see any other option. Well, making progress, but man, you have to wedge your feet in these cracks. Well, that was a little sketchy, but made it through that section. I guess, considering getting near 80, wasn't too bad. What a glorious day. Here we got some yucca. Native Americans use yucca for soap. They use the points there for needles. And then you can string it's real fibrous, so you can make thread out of it. And in later years, they make tequila out of the roots. Here's a pinyon pine. Wait a minute. That's a juniper. Take that back.
Yeah. Showing just how steep it is. Yep. Actually, this looks like a better way to go down from here.
That seems easier.
Kathleen, if you could get there, that's a helpful. Yeah, that little foothold, yeah.
Still going up. There's the saddle. Under a juniper tree. Okay, getting closer to the saddle. At least now we got some steps. I'm glad my shoes have pretty good traction. Well, the old sun is higher in the sky.
I remember now. It's hard to get to see the picture, isn't it? I do want that shot, but I want it from outside. And like you take it from over there, not from here. I want to get that rock. Like, yeah. This is the vortex?
They were good.
Yeah.
I'll send them to you.
Okay. I'm on the Fort Apache Formation, which is this, which is a limestone. And that's one reason this ledge is here, in that it's more difficult to erode. This material here is the Snelby Formation, which is a sandstone, which is a little more erodible. And right there is another little layer of limestone. So it's kind of intertwined. This is a pretty cool spot. Another pretty cool thing, that is basalt, or gabbro, maybe, if it didn't reach the surface. That's basically a igneous dike, which means these are, like I said, what I'm standing on is a limestone. This is a sandstone, and this, which are sedimentary rocks, and that is igneous rock. So a hotspot or volcano extruded molten magma up through cracks in this sandstone and solidified. And since it's pretty hard, it doesn't erode very well, so there it still is. So, pretty darn cool. Basalt. Okay, as I was saying before, what I'm sitting on here is the Fort Apache limestone. And that's that ledge over there where they're walking. And again, it's made of limestone, which means it was formed under the sea. So at one time, this particular layer was underwater. Well, you can tell that if it's limestone or the sandstone, is you can take a little hydrochloric acid, which I happen to bring along, and you just put a drop or two. And if you will notice, lots of fizz. So the limestone's made of calcium carbonate. You put hydrochloric acid on it, it bubbles. Makes hydrogen. Aerial tours. And again, near the top here, the lighter is Coconino sandstone. That's a more recent layer, obviously, since it's on top. Now the area I was talking about before with our volcano here, the basalt, that's much more recent. Those rocks are much younger. They're, let's see, well, they're basically associated with the basin and range. The overall geology, the central and northeastern part, Colorado and that area, was all uplifted 200 some million years ago. And that added a lot of potential energy. In other words, when you're high, the water has a long way to go to the ocean, so that it has more potential energy and can erode things a lot easier. So what's hard to believe is all this area that we're looking at in the valley was once level to this up top here. But all that sediment has all been washed away over the eons. Pretty amazing. Again, this dike, that's what this is a technical term for whenever you have an intrusion of magma in other rocks. So it's basically a form of molten rock that squeezed up in here and then solidified. Since it didn't reach the surface, it's considered an intrusive rock. So it solidified, and that was between 5 and 15 million years ago when that happened. But again, these other rocks were 250 million years ago. So a lot of time change. So the Colorado Plateau is basically formed with sedimentary rocks that eroded from the ancestral Rockies and Alleghenies. The area where the volcanic area took place, that was more to the south and west of here, and toward the Nevada, that area, the Basin and Range. What the Basin and Range is basically an area of extension where the North American continent was kind of stretched apart by the faulting, particularly like the San Andreas Fault along that area. And with faulting, and thinning of the crust due to the extension, it helped produce volcanic activity. Way out there, I can't really see it very well on the camera, but in the center there's a balloon. So you can take balloon rides. Most of this Shelby Hill Formation is made of sandstone, like I mentioned before, and it's mainly windblown, particularly the Coconino up on top there. That's basically just sand dunes out here that were buried thousands of feet thick. You have 3 kinds of sandstone, pretty much. You got the Aeolian sandstone, which caused by desert winds, just with a dune, the sand blows up to the peak and then it kind of avalanches down the side, and that forms what's called crossbedding. There are marks in the sandstone that you can tell what direction the wind was blowing way back then. You also have fluvial sandstone, which was deposited by rivers, and as the river went down, the sand was deposited in layers. Usually that's a little coarser sandstone. And then of course there's marine sandstone, which is that sand was deposited on beaches. So You can tell which is which by basically the size of the sand. And basically the sand is just quartz. Reason it's red is it's been stained by iron oxide. So it doesn't take much iron oxide to stain all this quartz. So, and again, the way you can tell, if it's wind-borne, you can find cross-bedding. If it's made by fluvial, river bottom, valleys and things, a lot of times you'll see ripple marks in the sandstone. And also in that type of sandstone, you'll see graded bedding, which means when you have storms or a lot of high energy activity with the water, the larger rock particles will be deposited. So you don't get the fine materials you do otherwise. So well, I got up here. The next trick is going to be figuring out how to get back down. Rocks, rocks, rocks. I was talking to a local. He was saying it's amazing how many people have fallen off that point and getting killed. Some people aren't too careful. Okay, look what I stumbled upon. This is really cool. Remember the basalt I was talking about? It's a dark rock, basically a mafic. You have two kinds of general categories of rocks, felsic and mafic. The mafic has less silica in it. That's more like basalt with hornbread and biotite, those type of minerals. But anyway, here is that intrusion of, or called a dike, that's squeezed. Again, that was molten rock that squeezed between the sandstone here. And if you look closely, you can see little vesicles where the air bubbles were in the molten rock. And again, that's called a dike. Sometimes the molten magma will intrude horizontally under a layer of rock, and that's called a sill. But this type of intrusion is called a dike. There's a pretty cool spire. Here's another kind of cool thing. Right here, that's an included rock in the molten basalt. The same thing up there. So when this was molten, it picked up chunks of sandstone, and they were included in that as this area here was all molten, picked up this solid rock, and then it solidified around it. And that's called a xenolith. That's pretty neat. Getting up more toward the top, this area is kind of cool. You can see this is real friable. And what happened basically is, as that dike came up through here, it kind of cooked some of the sandstone and changed its properties. So this is right up at the very tip of the dike. So it was hot and cooked the sandstone into that material there. There's Mr. Sun. Rather rocky trail. Ouch. Just put my finger on a cactus. That didn't work too well. That guy was a little sharp. A prickly pear. To repeat, this is the Schnellby Hill Formation with that gray layer in the center there, the Fort Apache limestone. The blackened areas on the rocks is called desert varnish. It's like a manganese iron deposit that's blown in by the wind, they believe. Coming down off of Cathedral Rock. Not real flat. Here's something pretty interesting. That right there is mistletoe. And there's some also in here. That different colored plant. And it is a parasite or a hemiparasite. It it's green, so it does have chlorophyll, but what it does is it doesn't have normal roots. What it does is it lands in the tree like this and taps into the bark and steals the nutrients and water from the tree. So normally a tree, if it doesn't have too many, will survive okay. But it is a parasite. So the tree would rather it weren't there. Ah, here's something pretty cool. These are lichens. We got greenish yellow, we've got orange, we've got gray-green. Lichen isn't one organism. It's basically a kind of symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae or a cyanobacteria. The way it works, the fungus, it kind of shields the algae, gives it a place to grow, collects water for it. The algae has chlorophyll, and that's what provides the nutrients. So they work together, and generally when you see a lot of lichen, that's usually a sign of good air. So I'm sure there's good air here. Ah, looky here. We have a yucca plant. They've got an interesting life history. The yucca grows in the beginning very slowly. It puts down a taproot when it's young. It can go upwards of 20 feet deep. That'd be rather tough in this rocky terrain, but that's what it does. And then it grows, and in around 10 years, depending on the species, 10 years, it sends up this shoot, which can grow several inches a day. It can grow up to about 10 feet high. After it blooms, that stalk will die, and a lot of times the base plant will also die. But it puts out little things called pups, which are little clones around the base of the dead yucca, so that then they grow and you keep a same genetically similar or the same plant, and they can be there 100 years, maybe more. So the yucca, pretty amazing stuff, nature. Here's a cool plant. That is called Mormon tea or ephedra. And as you can see, the branches have no leaves. They actually have a leaf, but they're real tiny and they kind of dry away. But the little branches have the chlorophyll to provide food for the plant. And as with ephedra, the drug, it has a mild stimulant and decongestive properties. So because of the Mormon faith, they couldn't drink coffee, so they kind of got around the deal and used the roots and brewed it into a type of drink with some medicinal properties. So that's called Mormon tea. Here's a juniper tree. These juniper trees are pretty interesting. One thing about them, they have this spiral grain or wood. There's a few theories on why that occurs. One is that the spiral grain makes them stronger. These junipers live in generally areas where there's a lot of high winds, and they're also found in drought areas. So they also do self-pruning. In other words, what they'll do during a drought, they'll pick a limb and sacrifice it. So you'll see dead limbs in here, but that's intentional. By the way, there's a mistletoe, which again is a parasite. Another theory on the spiral growth rings is that it distributes the nutrients in the water better. On a normal tree, if the roots on one side of the tree die, the limbs on that similar side follow, but not with that spiral limb situation. Here's something you see all the time: prickly pear cactus. One thing you have to watch out for are not those big spines sticking out. It's those little tiny brown ones. They're called glochids. And they have little hooks on the end. So once they get in you, it's very difficult to pull them out. The plant also produces a flower and a reddish-like fruit that is popular in Mexican cuisine. Apparently the pad itself kind of tastes like a green bean, or maybe a pepper when it's fried. So there we are. Prickly pear. It's approaching noon, so you don't get quite the colors that you do during the golden hour in the morning or in the evening, but still not too shabby.
Hey, run. That's a lot of work. Hold on. Freeze there. Let me get your picture. Okay, hold on. Hold on. That's the hard one. Hold on, I get it. That's it. I mean, if he could take his sit in a seat and be comfortable. Alright, you guys right. We made it. Oh, okay, Dawn. It's a song. What's a song?
Yeah.